Hi, I'm Russ with ESBService.com, and today I'm going to show you how to remove the 4-button timer and or overlay on your ESB tanning bed. Now for this demonstration, we've already got the cover removed, and from your perspective, you're looking at the back of the bed where the main power cords come in. So for this procedure, I recommend having the bed unplugged, of course, and you're going to need to loosen the cover first. Again, in this demonstration, you see that since the cover is gone, this represents where the timer is actually mounted on the underside of the actual tanning bed cover. So you'll see here that all that you have to do is there are 2 screws that hold it in place, and there are either 3 or 4 wires depending on the model that you have. So what I would recommend to start is simply, you might want to take some tape, masking tape, and label these wires. I would mark this one is J6 here, and then this one here is J1, and then J2. So I'm just going to start by disconnecting these. Pull this one off here. Be very careful when removing these wires from your terminals. I would not recommend wiggling back and forth. Just simply, like if it's like a vertical terminal like this, if you go up and down, then you can pull the terminal right off. When you have the wires marked and removed, then it's just a matter of removing the 2 screws. When you remove these 2 screws, it's going to loosen the bezel that's on the front of the cover, so I recommend holding that, and you'd also disconnect the 5-pin ribbon cable from the overlay here. So with a Phillips screwdriver, take and just remove these screws. And like I said, when you remove the screws, it frees up the timer, and it also frees up the bezel. So the timer's ready, and the bezel comes off. Usually the overlay is actually stuck to the cover. This is a new one here, and I haven't peeled to expose the adhesive yet. But when you have an older bed, it's going to be peeled, of course. So it's so with your adhesive, it's going to be stuck to the front of the cover there. So all you need to do is just peel it off, and that works just fine. When you go to replace the overlay, like I said, it has the peel and stick adhesive on there. So you would just peel it off of the new overlay, and then line up the 2 mounting holes, and then stick it down before you put the new timer in place. If you're going to reuse the same overlay, it's just fine. You don't need to have the adhesive. The adhesive helps to put it in place when you go to install it. But if you're going to reuse the same overlay for whatever reason, you can just put it back and line up the boss to the holes. Notice how they only go one way. You can't go this way. It only goes this way. So you would line them up, and then line those holes up to the holes on the timer. And that is what would hold the overlay in place if you're reusing your old one. But that is basically how all these parts fit together and how they come apart. The ribbon cable would fish through the little slot in the cover there, and then now they're all apart. When we go to reassemble everything, let's say that this is a new timer and or overlay set up here. What we would do is first I would start by taking the overlay and fishing the ribbon cable through the slot in the cover. And with a new overlay, you would peel this and stick it down. If you're using the same overlay, it would be just like we're doing here, where you just kind of line it up until you get the timer in place there. So So I'm going to put the timer here. It might help to actually take the screws and put them through the hole in the cover, and then do the bezel last. So this screw would go here. Use gravity in your favor, as I'm doing. So that would mean that the cover would be upside down, maybe on the floor facing up. So with the holes lined up, be very careful and only snug the screw. It doesn't need to be any tighter than that. Just hold it in place. Of course, you don't want it loose, but over tightening is going to strip the threads in the plastic boss, in the bezel. So again, just snug. Now, you would connect the 5-pin ribbon cable to cover all 5 pins as such. You wouldn't have it where there's a pin exposed like this or like this. Make sure that the 5 pins agree to the 5 holes in the connector. And then you would go ahead and reconnect the wires to your timer. On this version, we only have 3 wires. We have a pair of black and white coming up to the primary of the contactor. The black goes on the timer to the J1 terminal where it says contactor top black, and the white, the neutral, goes to where the timer says contactor white, J2 terminal right there. And then on this version of the timer, there's one more black wire connecting to J6. It says to backup timer on the board there, and this goes to the A1 or the 1 terminal on your backup timer. If you have a 4-wire timer, there would be one more black wire, and that would go in this area here on the board. It would go to J3 or J4. Both would be electrically the same, but the other end of that wire would connect over to the primary of the contactor on the hot side where the main power cord comes in. And then it would just be a matter of resecuring your cover back down, plugging the bed back in, and turning it back on.